Serialism is a different type of compositional technique associated with post-tonal music. It was developed by Arnold Schoenberg, and it goes beyond simple atonality. It goes into this realm where we are ordering or a series of pitch classes. And if we are ordering a series of pitch classes, we cannot go back and repeat another pitch class as we go through the series. Serialism became a style that was very much in vogue from the 1920s when it was developed by Schoenberg into the 60s and at its peak with the music of Charles Wuorinen, who recently, unfortunately, passed away. However, it can be a useful technique. It sometimes gets a bad reputation for sounding somewhat boxy and chromatic. However, it is an interesting technique, and it basically was a catalyst for a lot of what composers were doing in the late 20th century and how a lot of people work somewhat algorithmically or by a certain set of principles. So we will start with a simple explanation of the basic tenets of serialism, and as we go, we will perhaps delve into more deeper relationships. But serialism generally is the use of an ordered pitch class set. In pitch class set theory, by contrast, if we have a set 0-2-5, we can use that trichord in any different combination, any different orientation, and so on. 0 does not have to go before 2 and does not have to go before 5, etc. In serialism, however, we are establishing a pattern and a series so that you cannot repeat another note. So, for instance, a series would be 3, 1, 5, 4, 8, T, 2, where you don't repeat another note. So we often think of serialism as being a 12-tone serialism or serial environment where we use all 12-tone pitches. However, that is not necessarily so. Sometimes. Anyway, there are 4 types of row forms in this tradition. There is the prime ordering, which is the original idea or the original ordering of the row. You can also read it backwards, which is the retrograde. You can also invert a row form, much in the same way that we invert a pitch class set. And then we can also read the reversal of that inversion. So we have 4 row types. We have prime, we have retrograde, we have inversion, and retrograde inversion. A series can be of any amount of notes, but it must be used in sequence. So that means that it doesn't have to be a 12-tone row. It just depends on the composer and the piece. Most of the time, Schoenberg wrote in 12-tone serialism, meaning that every row has 12 pitches. However, in the 1960s, Stravinsky was often writing with row forms of 5 or 6. So it just depends on the piece and on the composer. So I'd like to start with a really amazing choir piece by John Tavener from the early 1980s as an example of the use of a series. And I have an audio file here on my iTunes that I can use to generate the playback, which is awesome. I'm going to go ahead and turn this down to move on, but I really recommend checking out the rest of this piece. It's gorgeous work by Sir John Tavener. It is an excellent example of how to use a shortened row form and what serialism can sound like. So these two parts of this melody, this is the original phrase, and this is the next statement or the repetition of that phrase with its own inversion. So if we look at the pitch intervals, so between G and B is a major third, a whole step down, a minor third down, and a half step up. That's what this refers to. Up a major third, down a whole step, down a minor third, and up a half step. Its inversion goes the opposite direction. So the same amount of half steps, just in a different direction, right? So its inversion goes down by major third, up by whole step, and up by minor third, and then down by half step. So in this case, if you would like to call this the prime row form, would be presented with its inversion. The alto phrase is an inversion of the soprano phrase. The inversion has the same order of pitch intervals, but the direction of those intervals is reversed. In measures 3 and 4, again, we have this interval pattern of going up a major third, down a whole step, down a minor third, down another minor third, up a whole step, and up a minor third. And in this case, we have the inversion of that, the retrograde of that. The phrase in measure 4 is a retrograde of the one in measure 3. This is a retrograde of the one in measure 3. We have an interval pattern that is a backwards rendering of the original one, and also the pitch intervals will reverse order and change direction in a retrograde. The soprano melody in measure 1 with the soprano melody in measure 3, right? It's basically adding notes. Since the phrase in measure 1 is only a fragment of the one in measure 3 and measure 5, it is the standard or prime segment from which all the other phrases are derived. In measures 5 and 6, we get the prime and retrograde forms in the soprano and the I form in the alto. So if we look at number 5, this is if you would consider this to be prime, this would be its retrograde. This is its inversion because the directions are inverted. And this portion would be the backwards rendering of the inversion. So we would call this the retrograde inversion. The phrase in measure 6, alto, is a retrograde of the inversion of the one in measure 5. So this is called a retrograde inversion. So this nice 2-measure segment shows us the prime, the retrograde, the inversion, and the retrograde inversion of this short note set. This is only of 7 notes. So it's a short series. It's an example of how to use serialism in a sort of non-fully chromatic, extremely atonal way. This is a very, very pleasing sounding work. Prime and retrograde inversion, the intervals of retrograde inversion are identical to prime, but in reverse order. So we have up a major third, down a major second, down a major second, so on and so forth. Intervallically, they relate to each other in that way. So to sum up, prime is an ordered pitch segment from which all the other segments are derived. The inversion is the pitch interval sequence of prime is inverted. The retrograde inversion, the pitch interval sequence of prime is in reverse order, and the retrograde is which the pitch intervals sequence of prime is inverted and in reverse order. So basically, this is talking about the intervallic relationships of these 4 row types. As we go forward, this continues to be less confusing as we go forward because we will be working with matrices and other things to help us keep track of all these things. But in general, we're seeing how they all have intervallic relationships to each other. Labeling row forms. So prime and inversion are named after their first pitch class. So we call this P7. Prime 7 because G is pitch class 7. If we show this as a series, not a pitch class set, but a series, 7E96358. Not in normal order because this is a series. The retrograde is named after its last pitch class set, and we'll see why eventually. It has to do with the matrix. So our retrograde 7 is named after its last because it's basically referring to the prime because they all begin with the same notes. 7E96358. Note again that this is not normal order. This is a series. The inversion is named after its first pitch class. The retrograde inversion is named after its last pitch class because of the same reasons as above. It is named after the first pitch class of what it is reversing. 12-tone serialism was invented by Arnold Schoenberg in 1921. That uses all 12 pitch classes in one series. If we use all 12 pitch classes from the chromatic scale, we call that the aggregate. That term will recur, I think, as we start talking about more interesting concepts involved with 12-tone serialism. So the aggregate is the complete 12-tone chromatic set. So a 12-tone row is usually constructed of subsets in interesting relationships. And as we go forward, we will look at 12-tone rows and their subset relationships. That is for another movie or recording, whatever this is. Okay, so this is a really nice, succinct example of 12-tone composition by Luigi Dalla Piccola. I have a recording of this here. This piece aligns more closely with that mid-century 12-tone serialism style where we have very wide leaps, very atonal constructions happening. It sounds somewhat difficult, but it becomes easy to parse once we apply a row form to it. So the next slide starts to pick apart what is happening in the music. Serial music composed with 12-tone segments is called 12-tone or dodecaphonic. 12-tone serialism is also called dodecaphonic music. Basically, an ordered segment of 12 distinct pitch classes is called a 12-tone row. In this piece, the prime form of the row is P8. And if you follow the music, you can see that each pitch class is used only once before it ends. 8975E4, 23T106. You can use any octave, any enharmonic spelling of each pitch class integer. The next row form is 98T, and it repeats 98, which is okay. 061327445E. Oh, I'm sorry. This is a list of other composers who have also composed in 12-tone rows and other types of serialistic ways, just as a way of giving some context. So our row relationships here are shown in measures 1 through 9 in the voice. We have our first 12 pitches are given here: 8, 9, 7, 5, E4, 2, 3, T, 1, 0, 6. The circled numbers are the steps in that 12-tone row, and this is our pitch class numbers. The next row form is 9, 8, T, and we repeat the 9, 8, which sometimes happens, not a big deal. 0, 6, 1, 3, 2, 7, 4, 5, E. That is our next series. Let's look at these two row forms and find relationships. So on the surface, they don't seem to be related a whole lot, except that they start with this G sharp A and then A G sharp. But if we look at the ordered pitch intervals, we can see the distance between these notes. For instance, 8 up to 9 is 1 semitone, 9 up to 7 is 10 semitones, 7 up to 5. These are all ascending, etc. This generates a series of intervals between each. If we look at this next row form, we also see another ordered pitch intervals. 9 up to 8 is 11 semitones, 8 up to 10 is 2 semitones, and so on and so forth. Again, at a glance, that may not look like much. However, if you look at the way that these pitch intervals interact with each other, they all add up to a common value of 12. If they are in a transposition, the intervals will be the same. So obviously this is not a transposition from one to the next. However, in an inversion, the intervals will be complements of each other, mod 12. So in this case, half step and a major seventh, those two are complements. These all add up to 12. Therefore, these two are inversions of each other. So this one as prime is P8, and this one, because it's an inversion of P8, is labeled I9. And we label it as such. So once we find these row forms, we can track them through the piece. So other row forms in Die Sonne kommt, if we start with prime and follow it through, if we start with inversion 9, 9, 8, T, 9, 8, we repeat. 0, 6, 1, 3, 2, 7, 4, 5, E. We can also see in the clarinet line that we have a prime form, G sharp, A, G natural, F, B natural, E natural. It's the same row form as above here, right? So this row form and this row form are the same. We have to label them the same, P8. That then starts over again here at I9. I9 starts with A, G sharp, B flat, A, G sharp, B flat. So that is still the same. If we look at other row forms in this piece, the only two that are left are from measure 9 to 12 and 13 to the end. Measure 9 to 12 is a reverse presentation of I9, right? So we have B natural, F natural, E natural, G natural, and so on. It is basically a retrograde of I9. And the next row is a presentation of P8 in retrograde as well. So F sharp, B, C natural, D flat, F sharp, C natural, D flat, and so on. So if you compare this one and this one, they are retrogrades of each other. So therefore, we call them different row forms RI9. Remember that we label retrogrades after after the last pitch class. So this one is RI9. This one is retrograde 8 because it's named after the last pitch class. This shows its relationship to P8. RI9 is related to I9, and so on and so forth. Next video will address the making of matrices. A matrix is really useful for tracking and analysis of a piece. I highly recommend printing out die Sonnekommt and tracking these sets, these row forms through the piece, and finding those row relationships.